Hey guys, tonight we begin in the shadowy early hours of Paris, a time when the streets are still damp with dew and most windows are dark. But not yours. No, your eyes are already half open. You feel the chill of the stone floor under your feet, the faint sting of flour-dried fingertips, and the distant scent of yesterday's crusts mingling with the first promise of new dough. You are an 18th-century Parisian baker. The job starts long before sunrise, while the stars are still gossiping overhead. The lanterns flicker in alleyways as you pull your heavy coat tighter, heading toward the small corner bakery that smells like smoke, yeast, and your entire life. The cobblestones are slick with something you choose not to identify. The city's still sleeping, except for a few other tradesfolk. Milkmaids with clinking cans, a lamplighter finishing his rounds, and the occasional night soil collector trundling by. Bless him. You probably won't survive this life long. Honestly, most don't. A baker's health is notoriously fragile, worn down by sleeplessness, soot, lung-dusting flour, and about 5 daily brushes with mild disaster. But you do it anyway. Why? Because bread rules this city like a quiet tyrant. No one eats without you. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and local time. I love seeing where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You tug open the shop door. Well, more like shoulder it. It always sticks in the humidity. Inside, the bakery is dim and warm, just beginning to come alive. You inhale the dense air, ash from the last fire, sourdough starters, and the eternal ghost of crusty ends. You light a stubby candle, its flame sputtering as you navigate the tight quarters with practiced muscle memory. This little shop is hardly grand. Low wooden beams, soot-streaked walls, and an oven that could have been built by Julius Caesar's cousin, but it's home. You duck into the back where your flour sacks live. Mice scurry, unimpressed. You nod at them. They know the deal. The mixing troughs wait like giant wooden bathtubs, yawning open. You dump in flour, water, a bit of yesterday's sour starter, yeast, optional, salt, expensive. You mix by hand because no one's invented stand mixers yet, and your apprentice is probably still snoring under a table. This first dough batch is mostly for bulk bread, pain de 2 livres, the standard 2-pound loaves that feed Paris's working class. The law regulates its price. Charge too much, and you'll have a riot. Literally. Bread riots are a Parisian tradition by now. As your fingers dig through the paste, you feel the cold shift to warmth. The oven's embers begin to wake. Outside, there's a faint glow on the horizon, but it's still far from dawn. You work mostly in silence, punctuated only by the occasional creak, drip, or cough from somewhere in the building. There's no one else to hear it, which is both comforting and mildly terrifying. You hear the bellows in the hearth sigh as the oven is coaxed back to life. A bakery oven isn't just hot, it's volcanic. You shove in logs, stoke gently, then let it rest. Too hot, and the crust burns. Too cold, and everything collapses. It's a delicate dance, and you do it mostly by gut. There's flour on your arms, up to your elbows, probably in your hair. You don't remember when you last saw yourself in a mirror, but you can picture the powdered ghost you've become. The shop is warming up now, your second skin of fatigue peeling away just enough to get things done. The city still sleeps. Even the rats in the alley have tucked in. But you're on your third batch, muttering a lullaby under your breath that you once heard your grandmother hum while shaping rolls. Maybe it helps the dough rise. Maybe it helps you not go entirely mad. Historians still argue whether 18th century bakers considered themselves artisans or laborers. Truth is, you don't have time to care. You're both. You create something beautiful, warm, necessary. But you also haul 50-pound flour sacks and burn yourself twice a week, minimum. Art with a side of third-degree scars. You glance out the tiny window, just a sliver of dawn trying to sneak in. It's still quiet, still yours, for a little while longer, before the bustle begins. The coins change hands, and everyone starts demanding their perfect golden crust. You lean against the oven wall for a moment, hands on hips, listening to the slow hiss of steam escaping a rising boule. There's no real pause, just the illusion of it, like leaning your head back on a train you never got off. A creak on the floorboards above you means someone's stirring. Maybe your wife, maybe the neighbor, maybe just a ghost looking for an old croissant. You roll your shoulders. Time to shape the next batch. Your hands are already tired, and the sun's barely thinking about rising. But the dough? The dough waits for no one, especially not you. You scoop the first lump from the trough. It's heavier than it looks, and slap it down onto the floured workbench with a satisfying thwack. The bench is worn smooth in all the right places, shaped by years of palms pressing, folding, and coaxing reluctant mixtures into obedient loaves. There's a certain hypnotic rhythm to this. Fold, turn, press. Fold, turn, press. Like a lullaby you perform with your hands instead of your voice. The dough is still cold, sluggish. It needs warmth, time, patience. Unfortunately, the fire's not quite ready, and the streets are starting to stir. You glance toward the tiny window again, where the faintest blush of daylight dares to appear. You're already behind schedule, and you were early. Such is the life of a Parisian baker in the 1700s. You are always behind, even when you're ahead. Flour floats in the air around you, coating your lashes and clinging to your collar like the city's gentlest fog. You inhale without thinking, and then cough, because once again you've forgotten the fine line between breathing and choking on airborne starch. The baker's lungs, they call it. A slow, dusty deterioration that starts with a tickle and ends with a wheeze. But that's tomorrow's problem. The oven groans as it reaches temperature. A few small cracks of flame lick out from its mouth, illuminating the low-ceilinged room in flickering amber. You toss a test handful of flour inside. It singes, curls, and turns black in seconds. Good. It's hot enough. Time to bake. You begin shaping loaves, letting your fingers do the thinking. Long, slim batards for cafe sandwiches, hearty boules for working families, maybe a few batards with sugared crusts for the richer clientele who come in late morning and pretend to be just like everyone else until you see the way they wrinkle their nose at burnt bottoms. The dough responds differently each morning, depending on the weather, your mood, or what the wheat miller added to stretch his stock. There's no real consistency unless you count inconsistency itself. You become a kind of whisperer, listening for a softness that isn't quite sound. When the dough sighs just right beneath your palms, you know it's ready. You load the loaves into the oven using a wooden peel long enough to double as a jousting lance. You've accidentally smacked an apprentice or two with it, but they survived. Probably. You'll check later. As you slide the bread in, you feel the heat curl up your sleeves. The oven blazes like a small sun, illuminating your flour-caked hands like something out of a medieval illumination. You pull back just in time to avoid another burn. You already have enough of those. Some fresh, some old enough to have stories. Outside, Paris begins to exhale. You hear a cartwheel creak over uneven cobblestones, a dog bark in the alley, and somewhere, someone is already arguing over cabbage prices. You don't need a clock to know the day has officially begun. But for you, this is the halfway mark. You're sweaty, sore, and not remotely finished. You wipe your brow with a rag that probably hasn't seen soap since last Michaelmas. The truth is, hygiene is optional when your hands are basically baked at 400 degrees every morning. Germs don't survive in this heat, or so you like to believe. Historians still argue whether French bakers in this era adhered to any formal sanitation practices. Some say they followed informal codes passed from master to apprentice. Others claim it was more of a don't look too closely situation. You personally subscribe to the if the bread doesn't kill them, it's fine school of thought. As the first wave of loaves begins to bake, the smell transforms the shop. It creeps through cracks in the walls, slinks under the door, and drifts into the street like a siren's song. The scent of fresh bread is enough to wake the whole block, and soon it does. Footsteps, a light knock. Not customers, yet. Probably one of the regulars. Someone who knows you'll open early if they're polite and bring a few extra sous. Maybe Madame Ricard from 3 doors down, the one with 5 children and a suspiciously generous cat. You crack the door and nod. She mumbles something about needing rolls before her husband wakes. You hand her 3 still steaming petit pains and take the coins without counting. You trust her. Mostly. And if one of those coins turns out to be lead again, you'll just turn it into a button for your apron. Back at the oven, you check the first batch. Crusts are cracking in that lovely golden way, the kind of crackle that tells you the inside will be soft and springy. You pull the loaves out, steam hissing like tiny dragons protesting the cold air. You lay them on cooling racks, or rather on wooden slats balanced across barrels, because you're too broke to own real racks. And then you do it all over again. The second dough batch is ready. This one's for the neighborhood cafe, the one with sticky tables and a violinist who only knows 3 songs. You shape the dough into baguettes, long, thin, and prone to tantrums. Baguettes are moody, too much water and they slump, too little and they snap. They are the divas of the bread world. Still, you make them, because if you don't, someone else will. At some point in the blur of shaping and shuffling, you realize you haven't sat down.
You rarely do. A baker's legs are calloused in all the wrong places. Your knees pop. Your back has started making sounds like a haunted door hinge. But there's no time to rest yet. Not until everything is baked, cooled, arranged, and prettied up for the first real customers. And then maybe, just maybe, you can sneak in a nap. If the bread lets you.
Sleep, at this point, is a theoretical concept. Something you remember vaguely, like an old melody that used to help you drift off. But for an 18th century Parisian baker, sleep is not so much scheduled as it is opportunistic. You sleep when you can, not when you want. Your day and your night are ruled by fire, not time. There's no alarm clock, no wristwatch, no chiming clock tower for you. Instead, your schedule is wrapped entirely around the behavior of your oven. It takes hours to bring it to proper baking temperature, and once it's there, you must strike while it's hot, literally, because the oven doesn't wait for you. The coals burn down, the bricks cool, and the window for perfect baking is narrow. So you learn to feel time instead of measure it. The texture of the dough, the color of the flames, the sharpness of the scent rising from the crusts. All of these tell you where you are in the day or night. You glance at the soot-blackened wall where someone, probably you, once scratched tally marks for hours. They're wildly inaccurate. Still, they bring a vague comfort. In this era, official hours are marked by church bells and public clocks, but few bakers bother keeping track beyond knowing when dawn breaks. What matters more is the dough's proofing cycle. If you mistime it by even a half hour, you could end up with a batch of flat, dense loaves that no one in Paris will touch, except perhaps the dogs behind the tavern. Historians still argue whether bakers ever developed a reliable internal clock, or if they were simply running on anxious instinct. You're pretty sure it's a little of both. You feel it in your shoulders, in your knees, in the way your eyelids start to droop roughly 90 minutes after your second batch goes in. It's like your body knows when it's allowed to ask, "Can we please just lie down? Just for a bit?" But no, not yet.
You pause to reheat the coffee you brewed 3 hours ago. It's now tar, strong enough to unclog a chimney, thick enough to stand a spoon in. You take a sip anyway. It doesn't taste like much, burnt beans and despair, but it jolts something awake in your spine. The fire begins to settle. That golden roar you rely on dulls into a steady pulse of heat. Your oven has peaked, and now you must follow its lead. You throw in the last batch, small, delicate brioches for the wealthy clients who sleep late and expect everything to be perfect. The dough was too soft, too eager to collapse. You scowl at it, but shape them anyway, tucking them into neat, paper-lined trays. If they flop, you'll call them rustic. If they burn, you'll eat them yourself. The worst part of this life isn't even the lack of sleep. It's the unpredictability. One week you might sneak 3 solid hours a night. The next, 10 minutes, curled on a flour sack while your apprentice tries not to knock over the molasses jug again. You sigh and glance at the narrow bench in the corner of the room. It's barely wide enough for one cheek, and the wood has a permanent ridge that digs into your spine. Still, it's looking increasingly appealing. Your wife sometimes jokes that the oven gets more affection from you than she does. She's not wrong. You spend more hours stoking its temper, reading its moods, and cursing softly at it than you do speaking to anyone else. And when the day ends, and it will eventually, you'll still be thinking about what temperature to light it at tomorrow. You glance outside. The city is finally stretching its limbs. Market women yell from their carts. Street sweepers clatter past with long brooms. A beggar plucks at a lute missing 2 strings and sings the same song he's been singing since the last bread tax was raised. You know this moment. It's the transition point. Night giving up reluctantly. Day arriving, overconfident and loud. Your brain wants to rest, but your body still hums with tension.
You pull the last loaves from the oven. They're perfect, golden, cracked just right along the tops. You should feel joy, but it's more like grim satisfaction. A job done, a fire tamed, a breakfast secured for someone else. You line the bread up in neat rows across the counter. It's like laying out small, warm soldiers. They're ready for inspection, and soon the first wave of customers will shuffle in, bleary-eyed, clutching coins, and demanding something fresh. You nod to your apprentice, who finally arrives. Hair a haystack, shirt buttoned crooked, flour already on his chin. He grunts a greeting. You grunt back. It's a language of mutual sleep deprivation. You toss him a crust from an imperfect loaf. Breakfast. He nods gratefully and begins sweeping the floor. You allow yourself to sit for one moment, just one, on the flour bin, lid closed, back crooked, fingers still twitching from hours of kneading. You close your eyes, not to sleep, just to stop seeing things for a moment. But your mind doesn't slow. It just replays the oven's hiss, the sour tang of fermenting dough, the crack of crust splitting open in heat. You wonder if there will ever come a day when you don't hear those sounds, even when you're far from here, even when you're done. A few crumbs fall from your apron. You brush them off absently, knowing full well more will take their place. There's no such thing as a clean baker. You stand again, shift your shoulders. The day has started, and you are its reluctant engine. The fire behind you crackles low now, satisfied for the moment. Time to open the doors. You blink slowly, maybe a little longer than intended. The kind of blink that tries to sneak into nap territory if you're not careful. But there's no time for that, not now. The shop is open. The city is moving. And you've got at least 3 hours before even considering a real rest. That's where nap warfare begins. You've learned, over the years, to seize sleep like a squirrel grabs chestnuts, little bits hoarded where possible. 10 minutes here, maybe 15 behind the flour sacks.
Once, in a truly legendary moment of desperation, you nodded off for 45 seconds while shaping dough and somehow woke up with it still in your hands. A miracle. Or a warning. The thing about baking bread is that it comes in waves, bursts of activity, then sudden lulls. You'd think those lulls would offer a moment to rest, but they're dangerous. That's when the body remembers how tired it is. That's when the wall of fatigue hits like a flour sack to the chest. So you fight naps, or rather, you train yourself to nap strategically. Some bakers master the art of sleeping in shifts. 20 minutes on the bench, 5 minutes to stretch, back to kneading. Others develop even weirder methods. You know one who curls up under the counter with a spoon in hand. If he drops it, the clatter wakes him. Another uses a hot baguette as a neck pillow. Not comfortable, but warm, which is something.
You personally swear by the leaning nap. Elbows on the table, head cradled in flour-dusted arms. You rest just enough to trick your brain into thinking it matters. Historians still argue whether these fragmented naps ever offered meaningful rest. Some claim the human body can adapt. Others say bakers lived in a permanent state of semi-conscious hallucination. You suspect the answer is yes, to both. One particularly foggy morning, a customer asked you what time it was, and you confidently replied, "Peppermint." You only realized your mistake 3 hours later. The body finds a way, though. It learns to flick between alert and unconscious like a candle fluttering in a breeze. And when you can't sleep, you zone out. You let your hands work on autopilot while your mind wanders into warm, crumby dreamlands. There's something oddly meditative about folding dough when you're on the edge of sleep. The repetition becomes a lullaby. You begin to imagine you're shaping pillows instead of loaves, that the oven is a fireplace in some cozy inn, that you're a guest instead of the unpaid host. You don't sleep, but you drift. And then you're back, snapped out of it by the clink of coins on the counter or the unmistakable tsk of a customer judging a slightly overbaked boulé. You blink, you smile, you nod, you hand over the loaf, and hope you didn't drool on it. Your wife appears briefly, hair in a bun, expression already calculating how many loaves sold and how many haven't. She doesn't scold you for the flour on your cheek. She just hands you a mug of reheated coffee and steals a roll for the baby. You nod. She vanishes again. She gets her naps when the baby naps, if the baby naps. Sometimes the baby just screams. Sometimes she screams with him. Sometimes she sings him to sleep with songs that sound suspiciously like old barroom melodies, with the words changed. The shop grows busy, then slows, then busy again, like a tide. You develop the ability to recognize different types of fatigue. The heavy-limbed kind that makes your spine hum. The foggy-eyed version where your own handwriting looks like someone else's. And the worst, the jittery exhaustion, where you think you're awake but then realize you've just been staring at a cooling rack for 3 minutes straight. That's when you resort to desperate measures. Cold water to the face, a crust of bread dipped in jam, or, on truly dangerous days, a brisk walk around the block while your apprentice watches the shop. You step outside briefly. Paris is alive now, pulsing with carts, horses, and shouts in 10 different dialects. A child runs past, chasing a hoop.
A chimney sweep whistles something vaguely musical. A fishmonger yells something, definitely not. You walk once around the building, the air sharp against your cheeks. Not quite refreshing, just different from bakery air. You re-enter the shop to find your apprentice nodding off on his feet, head bobbing like a poorly balanced melon. You clap your hands sharply. He jerks awake, straightens his collar, and pretends he was just thinking deeply about butter ratios. Sure. You were his age once, back when sleep was something you took for granted. You'd nap after lunch, even on busy days. Those naps feel like ancient history now, like folklore. Did they ever really happen? Or were they just stories you tell yourself while fighting to keep your eyes open over the next round of dough? A thud in the corner snaps your attention. Your cat, yes, your bakery has a cat, has knocked over a sack of flour. Again. You sigh. She looks at you as if to say, well, if you had been asleep, you'd be awake now. She's your unofficial nap guardian. She curls up on your lap when it's safe to rest, and swipes your nose with her paw when it's not. You owe her more than you admit. Another nap moment presents itself later that morning. 10 blessed minutes between customers. The fire is resting, the next batch of dough is proofing. You lean on the counter, cradle your head in your arms, and dream. Not much, not deep, but enough. You dream of soft grass, a sun-warmed stone, a loaf of bread still steaming in your hands. You dream of silence, of sleep that lasts longer than an hour, of waking up rested instead of startled. And then the bell rings. Another customer. You rise, smile, sell. The nap is over, but it was real. Probably.
The fire is steady now, your batches mostly baked, and the counter stacked with neat rows of loaves. For most people, this would be the time to rest in an actual bed. For you, though, rest often comes in stranger places, chief among them, under the oven itself. Yes, under it. See, the oven is not just a bread baker, it's also a heater, a guardian against the cold Parisian nights, and, when the timing is right, a makeshift mattress warmer. The brick foundation radiates heat long after the flames die down, and that floor space beneath the arch becomes a secret den. To a weary baker, it feels like lying beside a dragon's belly. Dangerous, yes, but deliciously warm. You crouch down, push aside a stack of kindling, and settle into the narrow hollow. The warmth seeps into your bones, dulling the ache in your knees and loosening your clenched shoulders. You close your eyes. For a moment, the steady crackle above becomes a lullaby. This trick is old. You learned it from the master who trained you. He said, every baker has 2 beds, one at home and one under the oven. And if you're honest, you've probably spent more hours on the latter. It's not exactly comfortable. The stones press into your hip. The air smells of soot, ash, and damp flour. But when you're this tired, comfort isn't about softness. It's about warmth, and not being interrupted for, please, just 10 minutes. Historians still argue whether this oven sleep habit was widespread or more of a desperate quirk. Some records describe bakers bedding down on flour sacks or benches. Others mention curled bodies beneath ovens, soot on their cheeks when they re-emerged. You suspect the truth lies somewhere in between.
bakers slept wherever the heat was.
The danger, of course, is oversleeping. If you let yourself drift too deep, the oven cools without you, and tomorrow's bread suffers. Worse, you might wake up to a burst of sparks if the fire flares. More than one baker's beard has met its end this way. Still, you curl in tighter, your apron smells of yeast, your fingers twitch from phantom kneading. Somewhere in the haze of half-sleep, you dream of giant loaves walking around like people, gossiping about which of them has the crispiest crust. Spoiler, it's always the one shaped like a boule. Boules are arrogant. The dream fades into warmth, and warmth into something dangerously close to real sleep. But then, clang! A pan drops. Your apprentice, of course. You sit up too quickly, bump your head on the underside of the oven, and mutter words not fit for polite company. He stammers an apology, but you wave him off. At least you got your nap, sort of. You crawl out, hair full of ash, and brush yourself off. Customers never question it. They assume bakers are supposed to look ghostly, powdered with flour and soot. You simply blend into the aesthetic. Back to work. The next batch needs shaping. You take your place at the bench, still radiating oven heat like a human coal. Your wife peeks in, notices where you've been, and shakes her head. But she doesn't scold. She understands. She's seen you nod off mid-sentence enough times to know you'll grab rest wherever it hides.
One day, you joke to yourself, maybe someone will invent a profession that pays people to nap. They'll call it sleep testing or pillow research. You'd be the most qualified applicant in Paris. But until then, you've got your oven. The day stretches on. Another round of dough rises. Customers trickle in, praising the bread, but never imagining the ash-streaked reality that produced it. You smile, sell, and stifle another yawn. Later, when the shop grows quiet again, you glance at the oven's shadowed underside, a tempting invitation. You won't crawl back in right now, too risky with customers around, but you know you'll return. Tonight, tomorrow, the night after. Because no matter how many beds you own, no matter how carefully you fold your thin blanket at home, the truest rest in your world comes pressed against stone with the oven's warmth humming through your bones. And you'll take it, gratefully. Every time. The day rolls onward. And though your eyes ache from lack of sleep, you're not working alone anymore. There's another figure who shares these upside-down hours with you. Your wife. At first, she pretends she doesn't hear the clang of pans or the scrape of the peel against the oven. But after enough thuds and muttered curses, she sighs, ties her apron, and shuffles down the narrow wooden stairs. Her hair is pinned up hastily, and her expression says she'd rather be dreaming, but here she is anyway. By now, it's 2 a.m, give or take. No proper person is awake at this hour. But you two, this is when you share the kitchen. You with your flour-crusted arms, she with her little pot of black liquid salvation, coffee. Not the sweet, frothy cafe version Parisians gossip about in the daylight. No, this is baker's coffee, bitter, tar-black, brewed in a dented copper pot over a side flame. Thick enough that you could, if pressed, patch cracks in the wall with it. You sip it gratefully anyway, and it feels like someone has shoved awake your heart with both hands.
She takes her cup with more ceremony, blowing on it, sipping delicately. Then she starts her usual routine, tidying the counters, swatting at flower moths circling the lamp flame, muttering under her breath about apprentices who leave spoons sticky. She's not wrong. There's an intimacy in these hours. The world outside is asleep, but you and she exist in this warm, smoky pocket of Paris. The sound of bread crackling in the oven, the hiss of steam, her light footsteps across the wooden floor, all of it creates a rhythm of companionship that daylight never quite matches. She sometimes teases you, calling you the ghost of flower. It's true. You're pale, powdered, and slightly spectral at this hour. She'll reach out, brush your cheek, and leave her thumb smudged white. Then she laughs softly and sips her coffee again. Historians still argue whether women played a central or peripheral role in bakery labor during the 18th century. Some records show wives deeply involved, managing shops and finances. Others suggest they were more occasional helpers. In your case, it's both. She keeps the numbers straight, the children fed, and the moths at bay. But when the dough refuses to behave, she's the one you call. She has a knack for coaxing stubborn flour into compliance. Sometimes she stays longer. Sometimes she heads back upstairs once the coffee is gone, leaving you to wrestle with your oven alone. But tonight, she lingers, perching on a stool and telling you neighborhood news. Madame Girard had another baby. The milkman raised his price again. Someone down the street swears they saw a nobleman slumming it at the market. You half listen, half shape dough, comforted by the sound of her voice. The baby stirs upstairs. Your baby. And she pauses mid-sentence. You both wait. The cry doesn't come. Relief. She sips again. At one point, she sets down her cup and stretches, arching her back with a groan. You'll sleep when you're dead, she says wryly. You reply, I'll sleep when the oven allows it. Same difference. She rolls her eyes, but there's affection there too. She knows this life isn't kind. Yet here she is, awake with you, making the night a little less lonely. The bitter coffee begins to cool. She drains the last swallow, wrinkles her nose, and mutters that next time she's putting cinnamon in it. You tell her cinnamon costs more than flour. She tells you to hush. She gathers the mugs, shoos a moth from the sugar tin, and finally stands. A quick kiss on your flour-dusted temple. Then she heads back upstairs to chase what sleep she can before dawn chases her. The bakery grows quiet again, save for the oven's breath and your own. You knead, fold, and shape, but the ghost of coffee lingers on your tongue, and the echo of her voice hums in your head. For now, that will have to be enough.
Your wife's footsteps fade back upstairs, and you're left with the steady pulse of the oven and the soft snores of someone who is definitely not supposed to be asleep right now. The apprentice. There he is, half hidden behind the flour sacks, slumped like a marionette whose strings have been cut, head tipped back, mouth open, snoring loud enough to scare the rats. You sigh. At least he's consistent. Apprentices in 18th-century Parisian bakeries were usually young boys, sometimes as young as 12, sometimes older, usually plucked from families desperate to give them a trade. They came with boundless energy, a half-formed sense of responsibility, and, most importantly, the ability to survive on 3 hours of sleep, in theory. In practice, they perfected the art of sleeping standing up.
You nudge him with the toe of your boot. He startles awake, stammers something about just resting his eyes, and grabs the nearest bowl of dough as if he'd been hard at work. You arch an eyebrow. He tries to look innocent, but he's got flour crusted on the side of his face in a perfect pillow-shaped patch. There's no use scolding too much. You remember being that age. The cruelest lesson of bakery life is that exhaustion becomes a constant companion. And when you're that young, your body fights back in sneaky ways. You've seen apprentices fall asleep mid-stir, spoon clattering into the batter. One even managed to nod off while sweeping, leaning on the broom like it was his dance partner. And somehow, the dough still got made. Historians still argue whether apprentices were genuinely useful in these small bakeries, or if they were more symbolic, cheap labor, a pair of hands to haul sacks and stoke fires. But you know better. Even when half asleep, the boy is essential. He's the one who hauls water from the pump, chops wood for the oven, and cleans when you're too tired to care. He keeps the bakery's lungs breathing, even if he looks like death warmed over while doing it. Tonight, you catch him swaying slightly as he stirs a bowl of sponge. His eyes close for just a second too long, and his head dips dangerously close to the mixture. You snap your fingers. He jerks upright, mutters an apology, and keeps going. For a while. There's a kind of camaraderie in watching him battle sleep. You've done the same. You still do. At least now you can laugh about it. Well, a little.
The trick apprentices learn is how to nap invisibly. They lean against a beam, eyes half shut, and let the rhythm of kneading disguise their drift. Some develop uncanny skills. One could balance a tray of rolls on his head while snoozing for 5 minutes. Another could snore quietly with his eyes half open. Terrifying if you weren't prepared. You once joked that bakers' apprentices invented the power nap long before monks or philosophers wrote about segmented sleep. You might not be wrong. But the risks are real. Oversleep and dough burns. Oversleep and customers leave. Oversleep and the master shouts loud enough to wake the whole arrondissement. Which is why your apprentice startles awake every time you cough too loudly. Later in the morning, you catch him resting against the bench, eyelids fluttering, head bobbing like a pigeon. You're tempted to scold, but instead you slide him a heel of bread with a smear of butter. He perks up instantly, bites down, and mumbles something about being ready for the next round. He's lying, of course, but at least he looks determined. You remember your own apprentice years, the blur of flour, smoke, and aching calves, the shame of being caught asleep, the pride of surviving a full night without nodding off once. Back then, you thought it was just a phase. You didn't realize it was the rest of your life. Still, you can't help but smile at the boy's resilience. Even half asleep, he's part of this strange nocturnal family. You, the oven, your wife with her midnight coffee, and the cat who watches everything with regal disdain. The apprentice will learn. He'll find his rhythm. He'll master the delicate dance of dozing without dropping dough. And one day he'll be nudging some other bleary-eyed boy awake with the toe of his boot. For now, you let him nod a little as long as the loaves don't burn. Because in this life, sometimes even a 3-minute nap standing up is worth more than gold.
You think you know the smell of bread. You don't. Not until you live inside it. Not until the scent slips into your hair, your pillow, your shirt, and somehow your shoes. Not until it becomes the air you breathe and, paradoxically, the reason you can't fall asleep when sleep finally arrives and stares at you like, "Well, ready?" And you answer, "Absolutely not. I'm starving again." It starts faint, a wet, flowery hush while the sponge wakes up, yeast whispering to sugar, a quiet fizz like a crowd clearing its throat. Then the oven changes everything. Heat hits dough, and the first sigh of crust lifts. Nutty, toasty, a little sweet. The scent rounds out. Hazelnut, straw, warm milk, even a thread of caramel when a bit of sugar on a tray goes to the dark side. Your mind perks up like your wife's coffee found a new door into your brain. You thought you were bone-tired? The smell thinks otherwise. The smell says, "Open your eyes, there is work and also snacks." There's science here, even if you don't have the vocabulary for it. You know the Maillard moment by feel, that instant the crust changes color and the air in the shop becomes edible. Your stomach rumbles on command. Cue self-sabotage. One nibble from a heel, just to test texture, of course, and suddenly you are very awake, very chatty, and somehow back at the bench with crumbs on your chin.
Meanwhile, the rest of Paris is catching the drift. The scent slides through the keyhole, under the door, up the stairwell, and out into the waking street. Customers have learned your clock by nose alone. And old man next door always appears at the exact second the aroma turns from floury to toasted. He swears the smell warms the joints. Honestly, it might. You're not arguing. The cat also arrives right on time, weaving between your ankles like a furry metronome set to brioche o'clock. Here's the curse. The very fragrance that lures customers and keeps you alert is the one that refuses to let your brain switch off. There's no night mode in a bakery. Even when you crawl under the oven for your dragon belly nap, the crust's crackle perfumes the pocket of air you're breathing. Your stomach thinks it's lunchtime. Your eyelids disagree. Your heart writes a strongly worded letter to management. Management, alas, is you. You learn a few tricks. Crack the door to let the cloud roll out into the world, and the shop grows less intoxicating. Dab a little vinegar on a rag and wave it near your face, sharp enough to cut through bread dream fog. On summer nights, you tuck a sprig of rosemary by the window latch. It chases moths and takes the edge off the sweetness. A neighbor taught you to drop an orange peel into the flower bin to discourage weevils and lend a faint citrus note to the air. Does it work? Debatable, but it smells like hope. Historians still argue whether bakers deliberately managed aroma as a sales tool, venting ovens at key moments, scheduling bakes to coincide with street traffic, or if the scent economy of Paris was a happy accident of wood-fired masonry and hungry neighborhoods. You suspect both. You follow the oven's needs, and the city follows its nose.
There's also the other Paris, the one that smells like damp stone and river mud, like horse and hay and something you politely call the alley. Tallow candles smoke. A fishmonger 2 streets over yells cheerfully into a cloud of brine. Leather tanners send up a thick perfume your wife refuses to discuss. Bread cuts through it all like a friendly bell, clear, reassuring, impossible to ignore. That contrast keeps you awake, too. The shop is sanctuary by scent alone. A mainstream truth, bread is the city's heartbeat in the 18th century. For many Parisians, bread is half their calories, sometimes more, and the price is watched like the weather. The authorities, those practical magicians known as the police de subsistance, inspect weights, watch prices, and peer into ovens at odd hours to keep things steady. That means you bake at night, not just by tradition, but by regulation. The aroma of dawn bread is policy and comfort stitched together. On the fringe, there's an older belief you tease the apprentice with. Inhale fresh bread deeply, and it fortifies the spirits. He tries it, turns bright-eyed, and declares himself fortified enough to stack 3 sacks of flour. He manages 1.5 before the cat trips him. Spirits, briefly fortified. Ankles, not so much. The smell teaches you time, too. Burnt corners, you were telling a story to your wife and went long. Pale crust, you napped 13 seconds too enthusiastically. Cinnamon in the air, she actually puts cinnamon in the coffee, price be hanged. You pretend to disapprove. You do not disapprove. Sometimes you go nose blind, what perfume folk call fatigue, until a customer walks in and exclaims, "Mon Dieu," and your brain remembers, oh right, everything smells like a dream in a bakery. On mornings like that, you stick your head outside. One lungful of the city's less poetic bouquet resets your senses in record time. You step back in, and the bread greets you anew, like the first day you apprenticed and thought, I could live in this smell. And then, you did.
There's a choreography to scent and sound as loaves cool. The crackle, minute fractures along the top, releases little puffs, and if you lean close, you swear you can hear the aroma leaving, the way steam sings off a kettle. You used to mourn that, beauty escaping into the air. Now you understand it as advertising you don't have to pay for. The hallway fills, the bell jingles, the coin dish rings. You'd bottle it if you could. You propose a cologne, eau de four chaud. Your wife vetoes immediately, the cat abstains. The apprentice, newly fortified, declares that the smell can predict the weather. You humor him. He claims a sweeter note means rain. You say it means he cleaned the peel for once, and the flour isn't smoking. He shrugs, then sniffs like a hound and says, peppermint. You both pause, remembering the time you answered a time question with a herb. You agree never to speak of it again. When fatigue lands hard, you reach for a trick you learned from an older master. Wipe the oven floor with a damp birch broom just before loading. The steam blooms quickly, shiny crusts, yes, but also a soft, woody breath that steadies you. Another old-timer insists tossing a spoonful of beer on the hearth calms the fire. Mostly, it perfumes the room with a toast that never gets drunk. The cat approves. By late morning, the scent is lazier. Sugars are spent, the air grows bready rather than sweet. You feel the same. Not buzzing anymore, just warm and floaty, like a loaf cooling on the rack. This is the hour the smell no longer wakes you, but rocks you. If you sit, danger. Your head will find your arms. You save yourself with busy hands. Slash, load, brush, sell. You keep moving so the aroma doesn't tuck you into a nap you didn't schedule. You once promised yourself you'd never tire of the smell. You haven't. You only learned its powers. It can rouse a street. It can distract an exhausted baker from the pillow 2 rooms away. It can make the poorest morning feel abundant and the richest customer feel childlike. And at the end of the day, when the oven is just an ember and the shop is quiet, it lingers like a memory, warm, soft, a gentle hand on your shoulder, reminding you why you'll get up and do it again. Even if you'd really, really like to sleep first.
You try to sleep. You really try. You find the warmest corner by the oven, push your cap over your eyes, and stage a tiny rebellion against responsibility. But the city has other plans, and they arrive as whispers through the floorboards. Rumors move faster than yeast. The miller's cart was late. A barge stalled upriver. Someone said the price at Les Halles jumped by a sou. Someone else said 3. Your pillow is the soft part of your arm. Your blanket is flour dust. And your lullaby is economics, with fewer charts and more yelling. Bread is not just breakfast. It's half the city's body and a good portion of its soul. That's not metaphor. It's a mainstream truth. In 18th century Paris, many people get most of their daily calories from bread. And when grain prices hiccup, bellies notice. The police de subsistance keep ledger books, weigh loaves, set the assis so that price and weight move like dance partners. You live under that gaze, a baker among many, watched because the oven is where policy becomes edible. You pull your cap lower. Try again. Sleep. But the whispers turn into footfalls, the kind that carry bad news like an extra package. Your wife leans in the doorway, candle ghosting her face. "They're saying flour's thin this week," she murmurs. Thin is a polite word. You both know what it means. Stretch dough or stretch patience. Neither stretches well. Outside, the street hums. Anxiety is contagious. In the market, a price posted a little higher than yesterday is enough to start a murmur. Add a delivery that doesn't arrive, and you've got a line of customers looking at your shelves like oracles. They ask, "Will there be bread tomorrow?" They do not ask, "Will you sleep?" You've seen this dance before. Someone brings up 1725 with the same shiver other people reserve for bad weather omens. Maybe it's a neighborhood story that grew in the retelling. Maybe it's a real panic lodged in memory. Historians still argue whether 1725 saw coordinated disturbances in Paris, or if that particular year is just shorthand for one of those times the grain markets misbehaved. They agree, though, on 1775's Flour War, set off in part by liberalized grain trade and twitchy markets, when crowds insisted on a just price that matched their moral economy more than any ledger's comfort. You weren't there for 25, of course, and you were young in 75, but as a baker, you inherit every riot secondhand. They live under the counter like old receipts, ready to rattle. You try again. Close your eyes. Count to 1 baguette, 2 baguette. Your heartbeat tries to pay rent in your chest. Sleep takes one step toward you and hears the bell on the door. "Are you open?" Someone calls, voice already edged. They're early or late or desperate. Time melts in shortages. There are practical worries you can hold in your hands. Flour, how many sacks? Wood, how many bundles? Water, how many pails?
But the worry that keeps you awake is the one you can't knead into shape. The suspicion in a customer's eyes when your loaves look smaller because you're obeying the new weight table for today's price, or larger because you're selling yesterday's bread cheaper to keep peace. The scales are honest because you are, but trust? Trust is a skittish cat. Yours flicks her tail under the bench, the official barometer of shop weather. Tonight, the tail is twitching.
You turn over and let your cheek find the warm brick. Under the oven, news sounds distant, like waves under a pier. You can almost nap. Almost. But your apprentice drops his voice and fails at whispering. They say the mill at Saint Denis has stones cracked. Less flour this week. He's reporting the apocalypse like he's proud to have learned the vocabulary. You do not thank him. He crouches close, face sideways. Master, if people gather, what do we do? Good question. Not because you expect a riot to march into your shop like a parade. Most unrest lives in the markets, the bridges, the squares. But because anxiety crowds closer than a mob. You answer softly. We weigh properly. We keep the oven hot. We don't hide the good flour. And you both know that last sentence is the line other bakers cross when fear takes the wheel. On the shelf above your head sits the wooden stamp you use for fancy orders. A little emblem pressed into a high white loaf for a wedding or a christening. It's a fringe habit surviving from older times when bakers marked bread so inspectors could identify whose loaves were light or short. You used to think of the stamp as decoration. Tonight, it feels like a signature under an oath you sign every dawn. I will feed you. Please don't break my window. Your wife returns with the ledger. She's not there to scold, she's there to count. If flour runs thin, she says, we switch more to pain bis. The darker bread, the brownish loaves with more bran, are less fashionable with the affluent, but steadier for the ordinary and the wise. You nod. You both prefer steady to fashionable. Steady keeps the hallway quiet. Outside, someone starts a little speech. Not an orator, just a neighbor with a complaining voice and an audience of two. They do it on purpose, he says. Meaning you, the bakers, the millers, anyone whose profession is a noun. Historians still argue whether bakers and millers colluded in shortages or simply became convenient villains when bad harvests, poor roads, and policy missteps collided. You could write a treatise, but it would be smudged with butter and no one would read it. Instead, you write loaves.
Your eyes close again. This time you picture fields, not brick. Wheat bent like choristers, murmuring in June wind. You walk between rows. Your hands skim ears of grain. Your heartbeat slows to the stride of a long path. You're almost asleep when someone bangs the counter with a coin. You surface like a fish, blinking, already apologizing to a customer your wife has already calmed. She moves with that Sunday voice she keeps in her pocket. We have enough for today, she says. Come back in the afternoon for more. It's not a promise. It's a cushion. The customer relaxes. Your cat stops pretending the coin is a cricket. The morning brings an inspector, as mornings do in nervous weeks. He's polite enough, hat in hand, scales in a tidy box. You welcome him the way you welcome rain, unavoidable, occasionally useful. He weighs 2 loaves, nods at the numbers, and writes carefully. You wish, not for the first time, that he could weigh worry the same way. You would show him a ledger full of heavy nights. When the inspector leaves, the shop exhales. You consider painting "We're doing our best" on the window
in sugar syrup. Instead, you set a little plate of yesterday's ends by the door. Free tastes calm people more than speeches do. The apprentice watches, impressed. "Is that a trick?" he asks. "No, it's bread." In the quieter minutes between customers, you and your wife swap tiny stratagems. She suggests a chalkboard tally people can see. 3 sacks left, 2 sacks left, so they don't imagine the worst. You suggest sending the apprentice to linger near the pump and say truthfully, "The oven will be hot again at 4. Not theater, just transparency with extra crust.
By late morning, the rumor tide ebbs. The barge, it turns out, did not sink. The millstones were cracked, but already patched. The price will likely wobble, but the shelves will not be bare. Your shoulders come down from your ears. You realize you've been clenching your jaw since the first whisper. You let it unclench. It sounds like a door unlatching. Sleep visits at last, cautious as a bird. You don't lunge, just hold out a hand. You let the bench take your weight, fold your arms, and sink into a short, faithful darkness. Even there, the city leans in to tell another story. Not panic this time, but ordinary hunger meeting ordinary bread. You smile in your sleep. The cat approves, tucking herself under your elbow like a warm comma. When you wake, the oven is still humming. The line is reasonable, and your wife has written a small, unfancy sign. Fresh loaves at 4. All welcome. It's not a shield against history, but it is a promise you can keep today. And tonight, perhaps, you'll sleep with both eyes closed. Perhaps.
Your lungs protest before your legs do. It begins as a tickle in the throat, just a polite reminder that the air in here isn't the clean meadow breeze you occasionally dream about. Then the tickle becomes a cough, short and sharp, leaving a faint sting in your chest. Flour dust, the invisible snowstorm of your profession. Every scoop from a sack, every slap of dough on the bench, every brush of the peel against the oven floor sends up a cloud. It drifts into your nose, coats your tongue, and settles deep where no broom can reach. The smell of bread may be comforting, but the powdery haze that builds around it, that's the part that keeps you awake long after you want to collapse. The doctors don't call it much yet. Some mutter about baker's asthma, others about the lung rot of millers. Historians still argue whether the 18th century medical world fully recognized occupational illness or simply shrugged and said, "Stop breathing flour then." Either way, you know the truth. Every cough is a grain of your life ground down a little finer. You try to fight it. Some bakers tie kerchiefs across their faces, though most of the time they end up damp, uncomfortable, and eventually forgotten on a hook. One older colleague swears by rinsing his nose with salt water before bed. Another chews licorice root, claiming it lines the lungs. You just cough, spit into the ash bucket, and carry on. When you finally drag yourself upstairs for a quick rest, your pillow smells faintly of yeast. Your hair carries the day's dust,
And when you breathe into the thin linen, the exhale comes with a wheeze. You wonder if your lungs are slowly turning into baguettes. Crunchy outside, spongy inside. You chuckle to yourself, then cough again.
There's a fringe tidbit whispered among apprentices. If you sweep enough flour each day, it will seep into your blood and make you half dough yourself. That's why bakers are pale, they say. Why bakers never quite lose the smell of yeast, even at festivals. The older you get, the more you look like a risen loaf. You laugh at the superstition, but sometimes, staring at your flour-coated hands in the dim lamplight, you think, maybe they're not wrong. The night doesn't make things easier. By now, the oven has been roaring for hours, and the air feels heavy, baked. Your skin prickles from the constant dry heat, your throat scratches, and every inhale feels like dragging in warm chalk. The cat, far wiser than you, has retreated to the cool stairwell. Your apprentice, less wise, sits too close to the sacks, sneezing flour clouds with every twitch. Sleep should rescue you, but it doesn't. You lie down for a short nap and wake yourself coughing. Your chest rattles, and the sharp little pain makes you sit up gasping before you even realize you've stirred. You wipe your mouth on your sleeve, half expecting to see white powder there too. Mainstream fact: many bakers in Paris didn't live long, at least not compared to their non-baking neighbors. Between the inhaled dust, the burns, the overwork, and the shortage riots, it wasn't exactly a recipe for longevity. Fringe fact: some customers believed the flour itself could drive men mad, that too much dust clouded the wits. You're not sure if that's science or just Parisian gossip, but on mornings when you accidentally put salt in the sugar bowl and sugar in the salt bin, you suspect they may have a point.
To fight back, you develop rituals. A quick gulp of water every hour. A habit of stepping outside between batches to inhale the less poetic smell of the street. Horse, cabbage, damp stone. Somehow it feels cleaner than the bakery air. You also cough deliberately, like pulling weeds, better out than in. Your wife hears it all through the ceiling and calls down, "Still alive?" You answer with a wave she can't see. Once, in the middle of shaping dough, you sneeze so violently the boule in your hands flies across the room and lands neatly on a cooling rack. Your apprentice applauds. You bow, then cough again. The strange thing is, fatigue amplifies it. The more tired you are, the more your chest tightens, the more every inhale feels like drawing dust straight to your bones. Sleep should heal it, but your schedule makes sleep a rumor, not a cure. And so you learn to live with the rasp, the occasional burning sensation, the sense that your lungs are as much part of the bakery as the oven itself. You tell yourself that maybe the flour has fused into you, making you sturdy, reliable, and just a little crusty around the edges. You tell yourself the cough is nothing more than proof that you're a baker. You tell yourself all this, and then you lie down on the bench again, coughing into the crook of your arm until exhaustion finally forces you into half-conscious rest. Your dreams that morning are strange. You dream you're floating in a cloud, soft and white, unable to see your feet. You dream you open your mouth to speak, and only puffs of flour emerge, words lost in white haze. You dream of bread rising in your chest, pushing outward until you're more loaf than man. When you wake, heart racing, your lungs feel heavy but real, your hands powdered with the same old dust. And then the oven cracks, reminding you it's time for the next batch. You cough once, slap your knees, and stand. There's no cure for a baker's lung, except more bread. And that, thankfully, you've got plenty of.
You hitch the cart as the moon hangs like a thin slice of cheese above the rooftops. The horse, old, patient, and named something dignified like César when he behaves, and Eumenes when he doesn't, snorts steam into the cold. The wicker hampers are lined with cloth, loaves tucked in like sleeping children, and you click your tongue, stepping into the quiet street that belongs to bakers, night watchmen, and cats with philosophical tendencies. Deliveries are their own kind of lullaby. Iron rims hum over cobbles. Your lantern knocks softly against the shaft, throwing a honey-colored circle that moves with you. The city isn't silent. Paris never is. But it's gentler now, as if it too is dozing between batches. You take the same route you always take. Down past the pump, left by the locksmith, across the narrow bridge where the Seine whispers to itself. The horse knows it by heart. You could close your eyes and let him take you. And sometimes you do. The trick to a horse-drawn nap is trust plus rope. You loop the reins loosely around your wrist, not tight enough to leave a mark, just enough to wake you if César invents a fresh opinion about a cabbage cart. You settle on the seat, knees bent, shoulders rounded, and let the motion rock you. The lantern creaks like a cradle. Your eyelids drift. The first joke of the night. You promise yourself you're not really sleeping, you're resting aggressively. That counts. Second joke. You tell the horse he's your assistant manager. He declines comment.
Mainstream truth. Before dawn, Les Halles is already alive, even if the rest of Paris is rubbing its eyes. Fish arrive flapping, herbs arrive dewy, and somewhere near the hollow blaze, the grain market, voices brisk as knives argue about measures and prices. You're not headed there now, but you feel its pull, the way the city's stomach decides the day before the sun approves. Many bakeries have standing orders with cafes, stalls, and households. Some shops, especially the bigger ones, hold contracts to supply hospitals, colleges, or barracks. You've got 3 stops on this round: the cafe with the violinist who knows exactly 3 tunes, a lodging house that prefers brown loaves because they keep, and the midwife on Rue de la Mortellerie who swears a warm roll steadies her hands. You've wrapped the loaves tight, cloth ends tucked. The warmth sneaks out anyway and curls around your fingers. You cup a heel like a little stove and let it thaw your knuckles. There's a fringe belief among drivers that if you slip a tiny crust into your tap, the horse will walk smoother and the watch will nod you through. You do it on nights when the cobbles feel vindictive. Does it work? Historians still argue whether such superstitions ever shaped behavior, or if bakers just liked an excuse to stash snacks close to their brains. Either way, the cap is warm and tasty in emergencies. The first stop is the cafe, a warped door, a sleepy owner, and a counter that sticks in one place every morning. He greets you with a shrug that means "I'm tired," and you shrug back. Same. He runs a finger over the crusts, listening for that tiny crackle, as if the loaves can speak their freshness out loud. He pays in coins and gossip. The violinist learned a 4th tune. It sounds suspiciously like the 2nd.
You smile, load off the baskets, and feel your arms remember that flour weighs more at night.
Back on the cart, the nap pulls again. Moonlight does that, convincing you your bones are made of feathers. César steps softly to spare the wheels, and you let your head tilt back. Your mouth opens just enough to invite air and possibly a moth. You dream without fully dreaming. The third joke: you've become such an expert at these micro-sleeps that you once woke up and apologized to a lamppost for keeping it waiting. The lamppost was gracious about it. Paris carries its own night laws. Lanterns glow at intervals on the broader streets, an innovation the city has been proud of since the age when the police took street lighting seriously and ordered lamps strung like pearls down the avenues. The watch passes, staves tapping a rhythm, hats pulled low. One nods at you, eyes already moving on. You're an honest cart with honest bread. The city needs you awake at unholy hours, so it tolerates your dozing and motion. You do not endorse this, you simply perform it. Second stop: the lodging house with the courtyard that smells like soap in the optimistic hours and cabbage in the realistic ones. A porter takes the brown loaves, pain bis. With a satisfied grunt, "Keeps better," he says, and you nod, because that's why you brought them. Mainstream fact folded in: the darker, bran-heavy breads fed most of the city when white loaves played at fancy. Fashion and scarcity push a pendulum, and you ride wherever it swings without falling off the seat. Between stops, the street narrows. A dog, appointed by himself as local prefect, jogs beside the cart and inspects your axle. Your cat once tried to stow away for these routes. She leapt aboard, curled into a warm basket, and gave you a look that said she was promoted to chief of security. You demoted her back to moral support when you discovered a paw print in a wedding loaf. She has not forgiven you. You let the reins slacken again and surrender to the sway. There is an art to sleeping exactly 2 corners without dropping into a deeper well. Your body learns the city the way your hands learned dough, by repetition, by the feel of it. Your shoulder wakes you when César turns down Rue de la Verrerie, because the slope changes. Your wrist wakes you at Pont Marie, where the bricks make a different song. Your nose wakes you at a certain candle shop that always overdoes the tallow. You are a man stitched to a map by muscle memory and crumbs. Historians still argue whether bakers typically delivered door to door in this period, or whether most townsfolk came to the shop, baskets under arms, to collect their daily bread. Surviving accounts show both: porters hauling stacked shelves on their backs, small carts trundling at dawn, women with covered baskets selling bread in the streets. In your world, deliveries are a compromise with distance and fatigue. You carry what the shop cannot hold and sleep where time allows. On heavy weeks, you hire a porter to do 1 loop with you. On light weeks, you pretend exercise is good for you. Third stop: the midwife. Her door opens before you knock, as if she hears the wheels the way you hear a loaf crackle. She accepts 2 small loaves and 1 roll still hugging its heat. "For luck," you say. "For hands," she corrects. You grin. Behind her, the room smells faintly of herbs and something sharper. Life insisting on itself at inconvenient hours. You tip your cap, careful not to drop the emergency crust tucked in it, and steer back toward your own hearth. The oven will want feeding, so will you. There's a quiet delight in turning for home. Your body lists the facts, fingers flour stiff, lungs a little raspy from the night haze. eyes rimmed in the kind of grit that only a bench nap fixes. But there's also the satisfaction of small places lit and supplied, of one corner of the city a notch softer because you passed through with warm baskets. You don't paint it saintly, it's trade, but trade with texture. A loaf is a message. We're up. We've got you. When you reach your street, dawn has shouldered the moon aside and is yawning into windows. A woman shakes a rug from a sill. A boy chases his hoop, its wooden rim clacking a counterpoint to your wheels. You ease the cart to the door, unhitch Cesar, and reward him with a heel he pretends not to like. He does like it. He pretends for dignity. Inside, the shop breathes you back in. The oven is a red eye, sleepy but faithful. The apprentice lifts one eyebrow in a question that means, "Any trouble?" You shake your head. Your wife appears with a cup and an unspoken instruction. Drink, then lie down for 10 minutes before the next batch thinks it's in charge. You obey the second half first. Your seat becomes a pillow. Your arms, crossed, become a blanket. Your mind, a horse that finally stands still. You sleep there, a soft, stubborn sleep, the kind that arrives only on wheels. It lasts as long as a kettle takes to be almost but not quite boiling, as long as a loaf takes to remember it's made of water and fire and patience. When you wake, you taste the road in your mouth and the bakery in your lungs, and your hands already reach for the next dough, waiting like a sunrise no one else saw.
You climb the narrow stairs, slow as cooling bread, palms on the rail, knees reporting their grievances one creak at a time. Tonight, a small miracle. The oven is banked, orders are done, and the street has exhaled itself quiet. You have something rare, delicate, and scandalously precious. A real bedtime. Not a bench doze, not an under-the-oven dragon nap, an honest climb into sheets you can call your own for more than 7 minutes. The room greets you with a triangle of candlelight. A stub of tallow in a brass chamber stick makes a soft halo on the wall. It smokes a little, smelling faintly of mutton and market days, beeswaxes for churches and rich neighbors. You live in the democracy of tallow. You reach for the snuffer, test the wick, and set the candle so its light pools neatly into the wash basin. The water is lukewarm. Your wife pulled the kettle when she heard your boots on the stairs, and you lower your hands in with a sigh you feel in your ribs. Washing is ritual, almost a ceremony. Flour has a way of nesting into every crease it can find. You scrub with the square of lye soap until your knuckles sting. Then sprinkle a little vinegar into the bowl because someone's grandmother swore it cuts the dough. You consider this your spa treatment, exfoliation by industrial accident. First gentle joke. You promise yourself a full spa day when someone invents a day longer than 24 hours and feet that replace themselves. You check your burns like a captain checks his chart. One fresh crescent on the wrist where the peel kissed you good morning, an older splash on the forearm, pink and shiny, a scattering of freckles that are not freckles at all. You dab goose fat on the newest places and tie a clean strip of linen over the worst. Mainstream truth is Saint Honorat, Honoratus of Amiens, is the patron of bakers, and sometimes you invoke him in these moments, not with grand speeches, but with a mutter and a nod toward the little wooden token on the shelf. Paris even named a street after him. Your life named most of its burn. You splash your face, wipe the flour from your eyelashes, and do the fiddly grooming that happens when no one is watching. Clip a hangnail, pick a flower mote from the corner of your eye, comb back hair that has decided to impersonate a haystack. Your wife leans against the doorframe, half smile, half yawn. She sets a sprig of lavender near the pillow, a tiny luxury pilfered from a neighbor's window box with permission and great ceremony, and says, "Try to sleep before the cat asks for your autograph." The cat, to her credit, is already a warm comma at the foot of the bed, set to purr. You glance at the bed as if it's a mirage. The rope frame creaks softly, the straw tick is plumped as much as plumping allows. You pull the coverlet back and see the little bed warmer's scorch mark in one corner from last winter. Lesson learned. Bed warming pans with coals turn sheets cozy and houses into cautionary tales. You prefer slipping a brick from the oven into a sock and tucking it at your feet. Second joke. You market this to yourself as artisan foot therapy, locally heated, no extra charge. Historians still argue whether the phrase "sleep tight" truly comes from rope beds that needed tightening, or if it's just an appealing story people repeat because it sounds like a lullaby. Either way, you give the frame an experimental tug and approve of the twang. Before you lie down, there's one more small rite: the room. You lift the window latch to trade one lungful of bakery for one lungful of river and stone. The night answers with a cool kiss and the distant clack of a watchman's stave. Paris keeps its own heartbeat after dark. Lanterns wink down the street because the city fathers decided, decades ago, that light beats fear if you hang enough of it in the right places. You listen for trouble out of habit and hear only ordinary life. A late cough, a carriage grumbling, a couple arguing in affectionate grumbles about nothing at all.
Back to the bed. You slide in and the straw tick sighs, prickly in a way your exhausted skin registers as not unpleasant. Your wife joins, careful of your linen bandage, and the two of you fit into the familiar parentheses you've made of yourselves. You pull the blanket up to your shoulders and, because you are who you are, say a short prayer for the oven to keep its temper, for the flour sacks to be honest, for the apprentice to wake before the spoon falls into the sponge. You include Saint Honoré, and, because it costs nothing, a nod to Saint Martha for kitchen patience. Third joke, you add a petition that cats be canonized retroactively for their services to dignity and pest control. A fringe tidbit, one you picked up from a neighbor's aunt. On nights when sleep won't come, burn a slice of bread black, crush it, and steep it in hot water, toast water, as a tonic for nerves and unsettled stomachs. If anyone is qualified to prescribe that, it's you. You've seen it offered at lying-in beds and sick rooms. You've taken it yourself on a riot rumor morning when your chest felt like a nest of sparrows. Does it work? It tastes like a raincoat, but it's warm. And warm counts. Your mind naturally reaches for the old debate about sleep itself. In this century, it often comes in two acts. First sleep, then a wakeful watch in the middle, an hour or so for prayer, quiet talk, or checking the fire, followed by second sleep till dawn. You've lived that pattern without reading a word about it. It arrived on your schedule like yeast and water. Historians still argue whether segmented sleep was universal across classes or heightened in rural households with quieter nights, but in your world, the split is simply what the oven allows. Your watch is when you mend a Benetton, stir a sponge, or count the day's coins with your wife whispering numbers you pretend to remember.
The candle gutters slightly. You cup the flame, trim the wick, and set the snuffer close.
tallow leaves a little crown of smoke that lifts and vanishes like a moth deciding on other plans. In the soft hush, your senses keep cataloging the room, lavender, dry and sweet. Linen, sun-bleached long ago and washed in river water, soap's faint sharpness, a ghost scent of the shop that refuses to let go of your hair. The cat kneads once at your ankle and settles with the authority of a foreman. You make a few sleepy promises to yourself. Tomorrow you will finally patch the draft at the stair bend. Tomorrow you will move the chamber pot farther from the candle's reach. Tomorrow you will teach the apprentice to tie his apron before he starts sweeping. Tomorrow you will not answer peppermint if anyone asks the time. These are good promises. You will remember at least one of them. Mainstream fact folded gently. Chamber sticks and snuffers are as common as spoons in households like yours. Tallow drips on tin saucers. Candle ends get remelted into small stubs for nights exactly like this. You keep a box of ends because light is precious and sleep more so. When you snuff the flame, the dark is not absolute. It's gray and soft, shaped by the window's seam and the last ember red under the oven downstairs that somehow speaks up the flue to say, "I'm here." You let your breath lengthen. You try that trick the midwife taught you. Count to 4, breathing in, to 6, breathing out, as if you were braiding air instead of rope. Your body unwinds by inches. The heartbeat you used to hear as a drum becomes a slow metronome. You feel the warm brick in its sock at your feet and think, fondly, of your dragon den beneath the oven. Then you do not think. On the ledge, the wooden saint keeps his quiet watch. On the chair, your apron hangs, ghost of a person who will wake before the city decides its morning. On the floor, your boots lean together like conspirators. Outside, the watchman taps twice and moves on. Inside, your wife's breathing steadies. The cat purrs. Your shoulders finally let go. If there's a dream, it starts with steam sighing from a loaf and turns into a field of wheat listening to its own music. It is not exciting. It is perfect.
You wake to Sunday with the same shoulders you had Saturday, which is to say, the same argument between bone and dough. In theory, this is your day of rest. In practice, Sunday is a promise the city makes with crossed fingers behind its back. Bread does not keep the calendar you keep. It keeps the one everyone's stomach agrees on. The bells tell you it's morning long before the sun makes up its mind. You listen from the pillow, counting peals with a baker's arithmetic. First Mass means a rush afterward. Second Mass means another trickle. Vespers means one last request for just a small loaf for the road. You have a fantasy in which you sleep through all three and wake restored, saintly, and possibly taller. Then your cat taps your cheek delicately, like a supervisor with a tiny paw, and your fantasy clocks out. Mainstream truth. In Catholic Paris, Sunday is officially for worship and rest, but provisioning the city is considered necessary work. Bakers are permitted, even expected, to bake, especially in the small hours, so that after Mass, families can carry home warm loaves the way they carry home news. The authorities weigh your bread on Sundays the same as Mondays. The city's appetite doesn't take a holiday, and neither do the scales. You tell yourself this while putting on yesterday's apron, an act of wardrobe continuity that passes for piety in your trade. Your plan, refined over years, bake early, sell quietly, then
actually rest. A cunning plan. You ease downstairs, banked coals winking, and set one modest batch to rise. Mostly pain bis for households who like stew thickened with bread, plus a tray of small rolls for the elderly neighbor who claims they're easier on the jaw. Your apprentice arrives rubbing his eyes and announces he is practicing Sabbath modesty, by which he means moving slowly. You raise one eyebrow. He speeds up, modestly.
There's a fringe thread to Sundays that you've come to love. Pain béni, the blessed bread, not the host, that's another sacred world. This is a parish custom, a fine white loaf offered by a household, blessed, then shared among the congregation after Mass or passed to the poor. Some weeks it's the butcher's wife, some weeks it's you, slipping a handsome round to the sacristan with a nod. The loaf travels farther than you do on Sundays. It hears more stories. You imagine crumbs carrying news like little homing pigeons. Historians still argue whether Sunday restrictions on commerce in 18th century Paris were strictly enforced across neighborhoods or flexed informally for necessary trades like yours, and whether bakers adopted their own localized customs, no kneading during High Mass, deliveries only by foot within certain hours, to keep the peace with parish and police alike. You abide by the version your street believes in. Keep the oven quiet when the bells are loud, keep the door half open and your voice soft. Keep the ledger honest and the cat off the counter. Mostly successful on all counts. After First Mass, your doorway fills, not a queue exactly, more a loose conversation that keeps happening in your direction. Women with baskets under shawls, children tasked with the great responsibility of carrying rolls without nibbling them, two men debating wheat as if they grew it themselves. You pass loaves hand to hand, and the city's tempo feels kinder today. Less bargaining, more blessings murmured out of habit. Your wife runs coins with the deftness she saves for days when tempers aren't set to high heat. She slips a heel to a boy whose eyes keep drifting toward the cooling rack. He doesn't thank her with words. He thanks her with crumbs on his smile.
You aim the morning like an arrow at an hour of rest. You do not overreach. You do not start a giant batch. You do not say yes when the cafe owner proposes just 20 more, as if 20 were a synonym for mercy. You practice a new discipline called no, but kindly, which sounds a lot like later. First gentle joke. You tell the apprentice you've invented a device called a Sunday, where time expands by simply deciding to. He asks how to build one. You say, start with a nap. He looks reverent. By late morning, the shop is tidy. The oven hums like a cat, content to be merely warm. You climb the stairs with a deliciously blank intention. Horizontal. Your wife has already aired the sheets. The room smells like sun on linen and the faint memory of lavender. You surrender to the bed with exaggerated politeness. "Excuse me," you tell the mattress. "I'll only be a moment." Second gentle joke. You swear you hear the straw sigh, "At last, a customer I can serve." Sleep on Sunday is different. It arrives not like a fall, but like a long hallway with doors opening as you walk. Shoulders unclench, jaw unknots, breaths lengthen, thoughts lose their edges. You slide into it and immediately dream of absolutely nothing. A luxury so pure, you would sell it by the slice if you could. You don't get to finish the slice. A knock. Not urgent, just persistent.
Your eyes open to the kind of disappointment usually reserved for spoilers. The sacristan's boy stands at the bottom of the stairs, hat in both hands. The widow on the corner, arthritis today, asks whether you have a small soft roll left. You do. Of course you do. You put on your boots with the resigned grace of a man who knows help shouldn't check the calendar. You hand over the roll and a scrap more than she asked for. She says she will pray for your sleep. You decide that counts, spiritually, as a nap. Back upstairs, the bed is still there, but now the watchman's stave is tapping down the street, and your mind shuffles the day's deck again. You remember the Sunday stew waiting by the hearth, everything humble in one pot, thickened with yesterday's crusts until the spoon stands. Mainstream fact folded gently. Panade, bread thickened with water and sometimes a little fat or broth, is common comfort. Poor food, yes, but patient and kinder to a baker's purse than meat. You taste it already, salt blooming, thyme quiet under the lid.
After you eat, drowsiness returns like an old friend who forgets he left. You stretch on the bench, promising yourself only 10 minutes. Third gentle joke, you call this first nap of second sleep of Sunday, a taxonomy that convinces no one, least of all your wife, who covers you with her shawl anyway. The cat, true to union rules, performs an inspection by settling upon your shins and initiating purr protocol. There's always one chore that steals into even the best Sunday: mending. Bannetons need new reeds, the peel wants a sanding, the flour scoop has a splinter with your name on it. You can do this sitting down, which makes it disconcertingly close to rest. Your hands move in small, tidy work, and your mind drifts to the guild. Dues due, a rumor of a meeting, a whisper about who's in favor and who isn't. Historians still argue whether guild life cushioned bakers on weeks like this or wrapped them tighter. Protection versus restriction, fraternity versus narrower roads. You live with both facts truthing at the same time. Afternoon softens. A neighbor stops in not to buy, but to trade news and a jar of pickles. Your wife swaps for a roll and the recipe for the sweet vinegar she swears keeps colds at bay. You filed the idea next to toast water in your mental cabinet labeled Remedies? The apprentice returns from his modest errand, having discovered a new market truth. People who say they don't want bread will take it if it is sliced for them. He beams. You promote him to assistant slicer with the solemnity of a ceremony you just made up. Evening is the part of Sunday that almost keeps its promise. The oven is truly quiet. The street tires of itself. The bells change tone, less peal, more glide. You sit with your wife by the window, not talking, counting lanterns down the street like lazy stars. You make a plan for Monday that includes a realistic number of loaves and, if the saint smiles, a realistic number of naps.
There's a rumor among older bakers that Monday is the true day of rest. Saint Monday, they call it with a wink. The day artisans recover from Sunday sociability. You've heard songs about it in taverns. In your line, the notion is romantic, bordering on unrealistic. Monday has bread in it the way water has wet. But you allow yourself a tiny heresy, a slower first batch, a longer coffee, a sterner lecture to the apprentice about spoons and sleep. You bank the fire one last time and climb the stairs, pausing to touch the wooden saint on the ledge. A real Sunday soon, you tell him, and a little peace that stays. He does not contradict you. In bed,
You practice gratitude like another craft. For the quiet hour that did happen, for the stew that remembered you, for the roll that fetched a blessing, for the cat who does not observe the Sabbath but respects naps. You breathe long, and the city breathes back. Tomorrow will come with its usual list: flour, wood, water, patience. But tonight was nearly restful, which in your life is as good as law. You turn on your side, and the straw settles. Your last thought is a small, stubborn loaf cooling on a sill, unbothered by bells or lists. You envy it, briefly. Then you join it.
Success smells like crust. Not money, though coins clink a pleasant little lullaby in the till, but crust. That deep, toasty perfume that announces to the street that you did it again. Coaxed a living, breathing dough through fire without scorching its feelings. The door opens on its own, almost, people following their noses like sailors chasing a friendly wind. Compliments arrive first, cash second. "Golden today," someone says. "Best yet," says another. You nod gratefully and discover, not for the first time, that praise wakes you more than coffee, and almost as much as panic. You wish you could taste it the way they do. Your tongue is a veteran in this war. After hours of nibbling test heels, checking seasoning, and swallowing crumb to judge moisture, your taste buds are soldiers on leave, tired, polite, slightly deaf. You rely on other senses to tell you what your mouth cannot. You listen for the song, that fine crackle as loaves cool, tiny fractures whispering along the crust. You press the bottom of a bowl with 2 fingers to feel the spring. You tap and listen for hollow cheerfulness rather than muffled sulk. If you must taste, you go for the crumb at the heart, where the heat lingers and sweetness hides. But mostly, you judge success by the chorus in the room. Customers tearing, sighing, chewing, nodding. Mainstream truth. For most Parisians of the 18th century, bread accounts for a staggering share of daily calories, half, often more, and the city organizes itself around supplying it. Price and weight are set by regulation. Inspectors appear with little scales like pocket omens. Guilds and police pull a web tight enough that even your naps feel supervised. In that web, a perfect bake is not just art, but insurance. A good crust buys you patience on days when flour runs thin, and gratitude when rumors try to sour the dough before it rises.
The counter glows with rows of loaves like soldiers on parade. Your apprentice arranges them into pyramids and immediately knocks one over with his enthusiasm. You restack with the easy flourish you pretend you learned at a guild feast and actually learned while trying not to wake the cat. People point, choosing with their noses, sometimes their ears. A woman asks for the one that sounds cheerful. You lift 2, tap both, pick the better singer, and earn a smile that could power an oven for an hour. Sleep-deprived success is a particular species. You carry it in your shoulders and under your eyes, the delicate high of having pulled it off again, layered over a steady hum of exhaustion that turns your thoughts into soft-edged shapes. You are so tired that you forget to be tired. You float. You wrap a warm loaf, pass it across, and for a second you're a magician pulling rabbits from a brick hearth. Joke 1, you consider billing yourself as slight of yeast. Your wife advises against it. fringe tidbit, some customers ask you to hold a still warm loaf to their cheeks for the complexion. You blink, oblige, and enjoy the momentary transformation of bread into spa treatment. Others buy a small roll just to carry it in their pockets like a hand warmer, and then return at midday to eat it. You've seen painters use stale crumb to erase charcoal. You've seen a seamstress use it to lift a spot of grease from silk. Bread is tool, comfort, currency, and occasionally, apologies to the saints, religion. You keep a small ledger in your head as you work. Crust shades, crumb openness, oven cooperativeness, customer patience. The dragon belly nap under the hearth gave you just enough charge to ride this wave. You catch yourself telling the apprentice, "When the loaves sing, let them finish the verse before you stack them." He nods solemnly, then whispers to one, "Encore." You allow it. Encouragement is good for yeast and boys. Historians still argue whether the long, slim loaves you bake for cafes should be called baguettes in your century, or whether that name, and the exact form people now imagine, belongs to later Paris. You don't have a dog in that fight, only a horse named César, and a peel with a nick in it that always tries to sabotage the second from left stick. What you know is that the thin ones wake quickly, sulk easily, and demand attention like cats with an audience. The round meeches forgive more and carry families through longer spells. Fashion and appetite tug. You keep both ropes in hand. By mid-morning, the shop hums like a hive that discovered butter. Compliments multiply. A regular brings you a turnip in case you forgot vegetables exist. You swear you did not. Your wife runs the coins like a pianist, sliding coppers and silvers into their homes with a rhythm that keeps tempers low and change exact. She praises a crust openly now and then, and you feel the words like a hand between your shoulder blades, steadying.
You permit yourself, between customers, a bite of the heel of a high white loaf, a proud, expensive thing destined for a household that likes their table to gleam. Your mouth registers texture, crackle yielding to soft, a pocket of steam that tastes like afternoon. Flavor? Your brain notes bread and then writes, "We can discuss later." You laugh, which becomes a yawn, which you turn into a cough because dignity. Joke 2, you announce to no one, "My taste has left a note saying it will return after a nap." The cat signs it. When success is obvious, superstition takes off its shoes and sits in the corner pretending not to watch. You touch the little saint on the ledge without making a scene. You straighten the peel on its hook, lest the hook think itself unnecessary. You thank the oven silently for not choosing today to be temperamental, and promise it a little extra love with the birch broom later. A fringe belief says a crumb fallen upside down predicts a busy afternoon. You find one upturned, and the apprentice gasps as though you just read the future in tea leaves. You nod gravely and mutter, "2 baskets more," then watch with amusement as he prepares exactly 2. A gentleman asks you about your flour, as if it has an ancestry worth reciting. You keep it simple: the mill, the grind, the season's temperament. You mention the faint sweetness that good wheat carries when the fields got just the right sun. He declares himself enlightened and asks whether bean flour ruins everything. You say that adulteration exists and noses tell the tale.
Good crumb smells like fields and toast, not chalk and worry. He buys 2 loaves and an opinion. Your hands have a way of telling you what your mouth can't. The dough this week felt obedient in the first fold and a little proud in the second. It proofed with a modest dome instead of a swagger. It slashed clean and opened like a smile rather than a grimace. All these are tiny successes you would celebrate with a long-savored bite if you had the palate of someone who slept. You do not. You celebrate by catching your wife's eye across the counter, both of you doing that small private nod that means yes. Mainstream aside, tucked gently between sales, guild life hums in the background. You pay dues, follow waits, mind feast days, and offer a handsome loaf for pain béni when your turn comes. Your shop sign, a sheaf of wheat and a little peel, sways over the door and has for longer than your apprentice has been alive. People trust signs, their contracts written in paint and wood. As the rush softens, you lay out a plate of trimmed ends and call it degustation, with an accent you found under the stairs. Joke 3, the apprentice asks what that means. You say, free tastes but with a hat on. Children orbit like cautious planets, and then, with parental permission and great bravery, approach. A boy bites and closes his eyes as if visiting a quiet country. You envy him. He will nap later. You will not. Yet.
The smell of triumph has layers. There's the obvious toast and warm straw. There's the ghost of birch from the hearth broom, and a whisper of steam that carries a sweetness you've learned to hear more than taste. There's also the faint tang of vinegar on clean hands, the soap, the cooled iron of the scale. All of it says we did the thing. The city eats. The line thins. The dragon in the oven yawns. You wipe the bench, arrange the last loaves like a chorus bowing, and feel the moment a little like a bell you can only hear in your bones. You are, briefly, full of fatigue, yes, but also of the proof that habits and heat made something people needed. Your success is ordinary and therefore enormous. You steal one more sniff of a split loaf, not because your mouth needs it, your mind does. It files the victory for later, for a night when the dough drags its feet and your apprentice drops a spoon and someone says the mill cart is late. You'll remember this smell and aim for it. And maybe, after the last coin clicks into place and the last merci floats out the door, you'll finally taste the corner you saved, if you can stay awake long enough to chew.
The loaves are gone, the baskets stacked, the till counted. The oven sighs as the last embers collapse into themselves, a low red glow, like the end of a long conversation. You should be elated. Another day fed. Another parade of compliments. Another inspector satisfied. But your body knows the truth. Success does not mean rest. Success just means you've bought yourself the chance to rest, if you can find it. You climb the stairs slower this time. Your bones are conspirators, whispering mutiny with each step. Your wife is already in bed, one hand tucked under her cheek, the other resting on the cat as if she's the pillow. The room is still, the only sound her breathing and the faint rattle of the window latch. You shed your apron, hang it on the chair, and sit heavily on the edge of the bed. You tell yourself you will sleep, truly sleep, not nap, not doze, not hover between one loaf and the next. But bakers do not sleep like other people. Even in bed, your ears tilt toward the phantom sounds of your trade, the creak of the peel, the hiss of steam, the knock of a customer's coin on wood. Your chest gives its usual cough, flower ghosts leaving you one breath at a time. You lie down, pull the blanket over your shoulders, and close your eyes. Darkness is immediate, but still your mind lingers in the shop. You picture the oven, banked but not extinguished, a dragon with one eyelid open. You imagine the dough left for tomorrow, rising silently like a watchful tide. Your apprentice's snores echo faintly in your memory. Sleep edges closer, but not yet. Historians still argue whether bakers in the century ever truly rested, or if their lives became one long, broken watch, segments of slumber fitted awkwardly into the city's appetite. Letters and memoirs suggest both. Some managed 6 hours split into halves, others lived on a patchwork of 20-minute dozes. You belong firmly in the latter camp, though tonight you hope, foolishly, for more. You turn on the side, adjusting the linen bandage on your wrist. The straw tick crinkles beneath you, familiar, forgiving. The lavender sprig still breathes faintly from the shelf, a whisper of calm in a life that rarely offers it. The cat shifts, purr vibrating through the bed frame, a metronome of comfort.
For a moment, you almost let go. The first heaviness arrives, that sinking warmth that drags you toward dreams. But the city has trained you too well. Your eyes snap open at a noise that isn't there. A pan clanging, a doorbell ringing, someone muttering about flour weights. Only when you realize it's all imagination do you laugh softly into the pillow. Joke one, even your hallucinations pay for bread. You breathe slowly, trying the midwife's trick again. 4 in, 6 out. The room loosens. Your wife murmurs something in her sleep, perhaps your name, perhaps the word enough. You agree with both. Tomorrow will bring the same, flour sacks to haul, ovens to tame, naps to snatch like stolen fruit. And you will answer, because bread does not ask politely, it demands. But tonight, you let your body soften into the bed and whisper your own demand. Just one stretch of sleep where no one wakes you, no bell rings, no oven growls. Your last thought before dreams claim you is simple. Bread is life, but life surely deserves a little sleep. And now we let the bakery fade. The oven cools to a soft ember, its glow dimming until it is no more than a memory of fire. The counters are bare, the shelves quiet, the cat curled in her private kingdom of blankets. Paris outside drifts into its own slumber, lanterns flickering like tired eyes, streets emptying of voices until only the distant hush of the river remains. You are not kneading now, not hauling, not shaping, not waking at every phantom sound. You are simply resting. Let the scent of bread that clung so fiercely all night dissolve into something lighter, something gentler. Warm straw, cool linen, the faintest wisp of lavender. Breathe it in, slow and steady, letting each exhale soften the edges of your thoughts. The bells have gone quiet. No rush, no queue, no inspector tapping weights on scales. Just you, in the hush, your body heavy and safe. The rhythm of the city cannot reach you here. The oven sleeps, the apprentice sleeps. The whole street at last agrees to let go. So let yourself do the same. Feel your muscles unclench, one by one, like knots loosened in warm water. Let your chest rise and fall, unhurried. If stray thoughts return, about dough, about fire, about the endless demands of bread, greet them kindly and let them pass, like customers you no longer need to serve. This is your hour, your rest, your sleep. Good night, Baker. Good night, Paris. Good night, listener.